Welcome back, everybody, to your sort of update on the state of the Malayan Empire, and it's not daily, I'm sorry for that. I know this was supposed to be up yesterday, and then life happened, by which I mean I spent all day traveling by train to another city, talk to an area of Deep Purple for 20 minutes, and then go back 5 hours by train. And when I came back in the evening, I was, to use one of my favorite English words, knackered. I couldn't record anything. It was like 7 in the evening. I'd been on trains for like over 10 hours at that point, so yeah. I did read 2 chapters of Stonewielder though, and then I forgot all about it and reread them this morning because brain and not so much brain. So here we are talking about all the shores in between, chapters 9 and 10 of Stonewielder, and we'll wrap it up tomorrow. And then we'll do other stuff on Thursday and Friday. And start with Orbs of the Throne on Monday. Yeah, the other things that I will definitely do, one of them is The Hood by Lavi Tidar will come out on Thursday, so I'll certainly be reading that as quickly as possible and let you know how great it will be, which, I fully expect. So here's our heads up for you. Go get that book, read that book. It will certainly be interesting. It'll be a deconstruction of Robin Hood stories. And everyone loves Robin Hood stories, right? Anyway, that's sort of my plan right now. And then we'll see how things evolve or devolve because, life is strange and I've come to accept that. But now, let's get into it, shall we? Hell yeah. Cheers. All right. So, we're nearing the end of Stonewielder. Great things are afoot, and we've finally sorted out where, like, all the things will be going. And that is overcoming the Blessed Lady, whoever that person being will be in the end, if we'll ever find out, maybe not. We've certainly learned over the last couple of chapters, over the old book, how the faith of the Blessed Lady is enthralling the entire subcontinent of Fist and Corel, how it is possibly doing good by preventing the Storm Riders from doing whatever Storm Riders want to do, which is, riding storms, I presume, and so forth, but also, preventing magic from working. Well, not preventing magic from working, but preventing people from using magic. Apparently having human sacrifices to keep faith going. All these kind of things. That's holding back the overall, place in a way. Obviously. So we are now looking at the idea that to whatever, conquer or bring the whole thing into the future, or into the present, the country, the lady has to go. And that's where we're going now. Like, there's going to be like 2 battles, which is like another one of those classic setups that we have had in fantasy, but also in war stories and whatnot over time. That is slowly happening here. It's actually very much, if you look at it, the setup that we have with Lord of the Rings, right? So the main army, led by Greymane, is also going over to Corel to have a final big battle. And in the meantime, while ideally the lady is the Blessed Lady as well, and everyone is distracted by all the massacring going on there on that island. A small group of elves, dwarves, and halflings, not really, of Malazan soldiers, crazy thieves, former priests, and others will go to somewhere else to destroy something very, very powerful, so the lady will fall, and the other party has, the chance at actually doing what they're wanting, what they're trying to do. So that's sort of the setup that we have now, and as I said, it's something that we have seen before. The small commando unit having to do some secret mission while the big battle goes on, and as I said, it is basically the setup that you have in Lord of the Rings as well, minus a volcano. Well, there is that crater, right? That's called Ring or whatever. Yeah, not Ring, but the Ring, where the Stormguard is, but that's sort of different. Anyway, so once again, when we look at the structure of this novel, we can see that Cam Esslemont is more direct in picking elements from stories that we have read before and using them for his purposes. And there's reasons for that, and he even gives us those. And this is something that I wanted to point out because I kind of looked over it yesterday and then I realized it is exactly what he does there. What do I mean? There is that dinner that Fist Relish has with his captains, and there's also Captain Palace there. The person that is from Parish, and, well, she never said so, but yeah, she's a Parish Grey Helm, I guess? Or at least connected to those. And they're wondering about her being there. It's like some people from that military order, are sent out to, learn about the wider world and bring back their information and so forth. And she gets asked about that, told that this is like rare because normally such military orders or religions or whatever traditional cultures are very much concerned with purity. And she answered that purity is an illusion; it doesn't exist. Because everything is influenced by everything that came before all over the place. And purity is an illusion. And she's right, of course. On a cultural level, definitely, when you look at what, traditionalists in all kinds of places, nationalists, all those people, what they claim, it is always, it's ridiculous. There is no such idea, no such thing as purity of of traditions or whatnot, because they're always a mess. But it is, at the same time, exactly what Cam Esslemont does with this novel. He picks a lot of elements that we have seen in other stories and uses them for his very own voice. And this I feel is important. I've said it before. You have, the more noir private detective style, almost private detective style, or good cop style narrative of Bakun. You have obviously now that almost Lord of the Rings style thing there. You have your redemption arc, maybe a redemption arc for Greymane, or that whole idea of everyone coming back to finally solve a thing that they never managed to solve in the past. That all of these elements that we have seen from other places are woven into something unique. And I feel this is important because it's so easy, and I hope I didn't give that impression, but that's sort of the point here, is that while you can, identify elements from other books, you can do that with almost all books these days, obviously, or all movies, or music, or what have you, art in general. And while it is a bit more easy with this novel compared to some of the others in the Malazan world to pick out these elements, because they're a bit bolder, so to speak, this is nothing against, is not a criticism of Cam Esslemont's writing. It is quite the opposite, because he knows what he's doing there, and the idea is to find your own voice by using all the elements that you want and still create something that is, better for knowing all these other influences. Being aware of them helps you to use them consciously instead of subconsciously, which you would otherwise probably do as a person, or as an artist, or in general. So that conversation they have on purity there at the dinner is exactly sort of Cam Esslemont explaining what he's doing as a writer, while also critiquing, certain forms of conservatism or traditionalism, I guess. So I wanted to point that out, and yeah, I appreciate it. I really appreciate it. It's just fun for me as a reader. Maybe that's just me because I'm weird, to read books and identify all these elements, all the things that are like dropped in or used, and like, oh, I can see how that was done, how that was constructed, where that came from, and so forth. So yeah, it also helps if you read a lot all over the place, because having wider influences gives you a larger toolbox to do whatever you want for your own purposes. So there's that. Anyway, that's just one of the things happening here, and I just wanted to point this one out because I feel it's important for the understanding of the Malazan world and the writing of Cam Esslemont, who, some people still kind of look down on in comparison to Stephen Erickson, which is unfair and stupid. So, what else should we look at? Another thing that we see is already the falling apart of a country. Now, when we first came to first came to rule, mostly. It's also going on Corel, but we found a country that was very much suffering from occupation. We learned more about the occupation side here as well, but that had kind of arranged itself with that ongoing occupation, with all the dark sides of that form of occupation being, corruption and whatnot. Some of the occupying army also adapting and adopting some of the local faiths and whatnot. We came to a country that was pretty fucked up, to be completely honest, which some of the people in there were not aware of. For example, Assessor Bakun. Well, we'll see how that goes on in the future. But that's sort of where we came to. And now, through the events that are going on here on all these levels, on a political level where you have the battles between the invasion of the Malazans, but also on a cultural and religious level, with the fight against the Blessed Lady that is starting there as one aspect of that war. We see how the entire place is falling apart, and everyone is already awaiting some form of a new order afterwards that will ideally be, either proper Malazan governance or maybe independence. Who knows? We don't know yet. But that's sort of something that we can see here with the rise of Carionel as, as a self-styled baron now, that is handing over former 6th Army people to Greymane on the one hand, and on the other hand probably doing all kinds of other things to make sure that he will end up on on top of everything when everything falls down in the end. So that whole part I feel is really interesting and, enjoyable almost to see all of that going on around the place. So what else should we look for? All right, Pike and taking bribes or protection racket and whatnot, which is exactly what made the whole first occupation so terrible. Is all the corruption of the Malazan occupiers, and we've spoken about that before in the Malazan books, with the whole idea of the uniform, of the honor of Marines, of soldiers in general. And I feel, especially for this part, what we see in Stonewielder and what we see with the 6th Army is important, because when you read the Malazan Book of the Fallen and other parts of the Malazan universe, well, you get the impression, especially when you also go and read The God is Not Willing, right? You get the impression that Malazan Marines are the ideal soldiers. They are honorable, they do their job, they don't forget their humanity, they help refugees, they help people if possible, and so forth. They are, in fact, model soldiers, which is connected to how the Malazan army was started by people like Dasim Ultor, whom we know to be, if we read our, Path to Ascendancy and whenever he shows up in other parts, whom we know to be moral and disciplined to a fault. But in order for it to not be too preachy and make the Malazans too, come over as too perfect and whatnot, it is important to have the other side as well, to be aware that parts of the Malazan army are corrupt. We've seen a bit of that in, Deadhouse Gates, for example. We've seen other bits where that kind of shows up in the army, where you have the internal, nepotism and corruption of the nobility and whatnot. But it's interesting to see it on a large scale, as we see here in Fist with the Sixth Army, which kind of is exactly the mirror to what happened in Seven Cities. It just worked in a different way because there's no rebellion, or hasn't been any form of rebellion so far, because maybe the way the society in rule especially is built up, which is already under the yoke of a religious authority. So if you have the religious part in your bag, basically the rest will just keep on going. But so it's important to see the corruption going on there. We once again see it here with Pike, who is already doing the same thing, but we have that internal mechanism with someone like Sooth. Being aware of it, and the internal mechanism of warning off people and making sure that that corruption doesn't spread, because it gives your occupying army a bad name. Because what you do ideally, what we see the Malazans do, for example, in Genebakis, is find the local corruption and take it out and make sure that those people suffering from corruption, which is always the common people, so to speak, will profit from your occupation. That's how you keep people happy. So we see that in action here. So I appreciate the fact that this is something that we see here, which is pretty fucking cool. All right, what else should we look at? Certainly, we need to look a bit more at Greymane, because we learned something. Apparently, Greymane's not just all disregard for Captain Rillish, or Fist Rillish at this point, because he leaves him behind to help with Ipshank to do that special mission, to find whatever is hidden in those caves and destroy it, which we'll learn about tomorrow. But what we definitely learn is, and have probably learned by now, is that Greymane is not good at communicating. He is very much not good at that. Which maybe is why he would have why he had fit in so well with the Crimson Guard, because when you look at all those Crimson Guard people that we've met so far, they're also not good at communication at all with it. It could have, avoided so much trouble if people would actually talk to each other and believe each other and be honest about stuff. So maybe that's that, but it's interesting to see how that continues. And once we're done with the entire book, I guess we'll have an overall reflection on the character of Greymane, and how past trauma can prevent you from communicating in the present, which is something that I guess most of us can probably connect to and have experience on. Anyway, so that's something that I guess we'll talk about more tomorrow when the whole thing comes together and ends. We see the betrayal of the Moranth. Now I spoke about that before, when we see Overlord Yiel for the first time, with his growing madness, his fear of being always cold, even though he obviously is not. He is still a brilliant tactician, because his idea, or his deal of going to Corel and working together with the Storm Guard is a brilliant plan if it works out. But he is highly paranoid, which is why he doesn't trust the Black Moranth anymore and betrays them, which, is, once again, it's one of those stories that we have seen before. You have someone who is a betrayer by trade, because he obviously, kicked out Greymane and so forth to make sure that he became Overlord, and then just made himself Overlord and disassociated himself from the Malazan Empire. So there is that, with that starts that paranoia creeping in, and we see that continuing here because he expects betrayal at every turn in his insanity. So he's still capable of brilliant decisions, or something that sounds brilliant so far. But yeah. On the other hand, he makes crucial mistakes there, and we'll see how that will turn out in in the end. Because we know that the Black Moranth were not about to betray him. We know that because we have Boren's perspective there at the end of chapter 10 as well. So it's one of those crucial things where we see that obsession and paranoia will not help in the end. That's not exactly like news at this point, I assume. All right. What else? Yes, Ivana. We kind of learned a lot about Martel over the time now, and she dies. Obviously, what we learned is that she's a Malazan who was true to Greymane until she had to leave, and is still very much in awe of Greymane, which gives you that connection that what the Army of Reform is doing may just be about about the same business that Greymane is about and everyone else. So that's sort of where we come to with her death, and her tells Greymane and that I stay true and try to do the right thing and whatnot. That's sort of where we see that part of the story slowly connecting to the rest to make everything come to one final conclusion in those last two chapters tomorrow. But what I wanted to talk about here is the idea that in Fist being Fist and Corel being the first time we had a lot of religion going on. The idea that you have a monolithic church, that being the monolithic church of the Blessed Lady, that sort of religion, monotheism, breeds reformist or millennial movement, what you might call peasant uprisings, in other ways. And there's certainly some sort of parallelism that you could draw from what is going on there with the Army of Reform and, say, the French army led by Joan of Arc, or Jeanne d'Arc, which is a whole other topic. Although, the brilliant female general here is obviously a brilliant female general because she actually is a soldier and not just a peasant girl with maybe magical skills or not. We don't know. So that's something to look at, that this form of religious monotheism will breed that kind of rebellion from time to time. We learned that it has happened before a lot of times, right? We have these conversations, these memories of, say, Ivana mostly, that there have been uprisings before that always were crushed, because you have that combination of the church and state in Jurlan, at least. So yeah, that's going to be interesting to see how that will turn out in the end. We have the ongoing betrayal of Tudsin for all these reasons, and we'll see where that will end tomorrow as well. All right. We also need to talk about the Army of Light and Kiska before we end this for today. The Army of Light is obviously Taist Liosan. And one of the interesting things that we learn here is, first of all, everyone's favorite punching bag, Brother Jarud, is there as well. But what I find most interesting is that Cam Esslemont also portrays the Taist Liosan as almost fascists, right? We have them sitting there, being on their moral high horse, absolutists to a fault, which makes sense when you look at how they may work together with Forquil Assail. in the Malazan Book of the Fallen at some point. But what we see mostly is them, sitting there, taking Kiska and everyone prisoner. We finally get the revelation that Jabal is, of course, Leoman of the Flails, when everyone's favorite mansplainer and otherwise waffler and undecided person, Lorik, shows up. And yeah, is just as annoying and idiotic here as he was in the Malazan Book of the Fallen, which, in that whole long tradition of looking how different authors portray the same character, is interesting, because apparently Lorik was unlikable for everyone. So we'll see what's going on there. There is obviously the idea that maybe Teichran is the person creating that whole thing, the Wall of Chaos. It may also still be, what's his name? Yath something? From Return of the Crimson Guard. As I said, this is sort of one of those stories that is going on at the same time and seemingly has no connection whatsoever to our main plot in Fist and Corel, but it is one of the few things that connects this one to Return of the Crimson Guard, and with Kiska even to the book before, which is Knight of Knives, and maybe will still show up in Orb Scepter Throne. Will it also be in the other final books of that series? We don't know yet, but it's important to see how that thing is one of the ongoing background threads of narrative until later on. Plus, we get a bit more shadow stuff around there, which, once again, the idea of absolutism that you see with the Tais Leosan. There's the realm of light, and there's the realm of darkness, and they can't actually agree, actually accept the realm of shadow being its very own thing, which, makes sense, because shadow is by nature not absolute. It is always relative. It is moving all about, changing all the time, and that's something that Tais Leosan have probably even more problems with accepting than Tais Andy, probably. But that's a big question to answer, overall in the Malazan world. So, what else is there to talk about? Not that much, I think. Well, actually, nothing really. We have what's his name, Bakun, being still being Bakun, but now in prison again. But also rising to power within the local authority, because he is the only one who stays behind because of his sense of duty and honor. So maybe there's something going on in the future with Bakun. But we'll see how all of that will turn out in the end. And tomorrow, that is what the end, basically. We will see how all of that turns out, if the lady will fall, if the lady will not fall. We'll see. Anyway, I got work to do. I got a festival to plan, and tours to book, and other stuff, and new mead to make. I'll talk to you tomorrow about the end of Stonewielder, and until then, have a great Tuesday. Cheers.